Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm here to talk to you today about Module 2, Mod 2. And Mod 2 is going to be about kind of the terms list as well as the PowerPoint that I am offering on identity and ideology. Okay, so you have to look at the list of terms that I provide, use the free glossaries and kind of pages to literary devices that are also there, the links. You can also just simply Google the terms if you like, and what I need you to do is have a working definition or understanding of the term. By that I mean you don't really need to know the term verbatim. You don't have to, I need you to understand the term in a functional sense. By that I mean you have the knowledge to apply the term. You knowing the exact definition, that's it's fine and good, but you don't need the exact definition. What you need is a functional working understanding of a term, so that way you can apply it to the stories. Again, everything that we're doing, it's applying to the stories, and then of course, applying things back to the greatest story of all, which is your life, so keep that in mind as you examine the terms in the PowerPoint, bringing things back to you. Why do you think the way you think? Okay, getting to that point of understanding is going to be very important to your ability to develop a sense of autonomy and have free will. We want these things. We don't want to give up our free will. We don't want to give up our autonomy. We don't want to be constrained and limited. We want to possess, we want to be empowered, and so we have to look at and examine stories and their conflicts and the struggles so that we understand the struggles and the conflicts in our own lives so that we don't get locked down. So again, we're grounding ourselves with these terms. They will offer us, kind of a vocabulary to kind of speak through, as well as also a pathway to greater understanding in the meaning of, kind of the term itself and its application. So we end up with vocabulary and something that's applicable to kind of the stories. I'm going to limit how many devices that will work with this semester. I like to limit the number of devices to keep it simple, because if I go too deeply into the varying devices, to explore kind of, again, the four major genres, and film, we can just get bogged down in terminology. So I want to give you something that, a list that's, workable. That way you don't get locked down in too many terms, that you have things that you can apply. So that way, again, you can't apply everything. So we'll all be different in what we apply, what we see, in a story, what stands out to us. So it's cool that there's, so many different directions and pathways. We can all bring each other to, again, getting a greater sense of understanding of truth, what exists behind a story. And then we see the truth and we either applaud that truth, or we begin the process of seeing how we can make, positive changes, based on what is revealed to us in a story. So again, I'm limiting the number of devices. And again, you are the protagonist of your life. So if you understand the stories that we read, you will also be able to understand your life, your story, and the stories of people around you, more clearly. And you end up being hopefully a better person because of it. Terms. And I'm not going to go through the list. Usually what will happen is face-to-face, I'll put you in groups and you'll review the terms together, and then I'll take questions and we'll talk about examples and so on. So it's this, part of the semester is usually a little more interactive, getting you in groups, getting you involved with each other. Here you're going to have to do this on your own, and I need you again to look through the terms, look them up, and then have a working definition, that which you can apply. Sometimes terms, you'll see them for how they exist individually, and then other times you'll see how a term can be used and it'll unfold a truth. It'll begin the process of revealing how other terms are coming into concert with it, and the terms are working together to create something that is the structure of the narrative, and so therefore then revealing a greater sense of truth. So for example, if we look at the term illusion, which means when an author kind of refers to a person, place, a historical person, place, event, or even idea in a story. And in doing so, what they do is they begin the process of attaching that to the story so it develops layers. And that in those layers, that's where the greater meaning exists, okay? So an allusion, it's a historical reference to a person, a place, a historical event, and so on. So in the story Virgins, very early in the story, there's going to be a reference to a song and the artist associated with that song. And so what happens is that is an allusion to that particular artist and that song. It begins the process of developing then layers. What that song, also does, it begins the process of foreshadowing, hinting at the future for the protagonist of the story. So now we see the allusion, we attach it to the protagonist, right, in the story. And so it helps us understand and how that character is going to be developed, right, their characterization. So now, just through the song and the artist, we have an allusion that leads us to this aspect of, again, foreshadowing, which helps, it also helps with characterization. It also helps establish something thematically that we might understand. So this is why we kind of pay close attention to stories and what authors hand us. We're not all going to catch the same things. Certain things certainly stand out far more than other things in a story. Absolutely, okay? But some of us might see things more minute that we miss, and they might be able to hand us a sense of knowledge through finding those smaller crumbs. So, everything's on the table, great and large, when you're examining a story and the application of terms and what you might have eventually unfold as a degree of truth, okay? So that was just one example. So in the story Virgins, look for that song in the beginning of the story and the artist, and you'll see how, again, what is the allusion, the meaning behind the allusion? You could start there. And then what does it foreshadow? How does it help with the development of characterization? How does it then begin the process of establishing theme? So that one's a really good one for kind of something unfolding in that fashion. Quick heads up on symbol or symbolism. I'll let you kind of find the definition. But when we're talking about things that are symbolic, you need to be careful of when something is representative of something and then when something is symbolic. For example, you could say that if somebody hated somebody else and they went and they picked up a knife and stabbed them, it would be symbolic of their hatred. No, that would be representative. That is literal. The stabbing of that person doesn't mean something other than what it's supposed to mean. The action is what it is. It's not, again, symbolic of something else. It does represent the hate directly. Be careful of when things are, if they are literal, what is taking place in an action, then it is representative. If you can tease out something more, that action, how it plays out, how it is, again, something that's representative of something that's other than the literal, okay, then you have something that's symbolic. You think about, like, for example, I just wrote down the example of a jellyfish, right? So if I refer to someone, he or she is such a jellyfish, right? So obviously they are not literally a jellyfish. So what I'm doing is I'm handing them all our cultural understanding of what a jellyfish is, and then that then applies to that person to give us a greater sense of understanding of that person. I've used figurative language. I've used here, a symbol. They are like a simile, a jellyfish, okay? And, it could be up to you in terms of, like, what is your interpretation of how we perceive someone who's a jellyfish? Because personally, I see them as a feeding machine. A very narcissistic person would be a jellyfish. They float along, they eat and consume constantly without, any conscious, and occasionally they sting those, they kind of, they bump into, again, that would play out in a greater sense in terms of how the author is describing, a character and how they attach jellyfish. Because oftentimes jellyfish means spineless, right? So it's symbolic of someone who is spineless. I've never really thought that, because jellyfish, if you've ever been stung by one, it hurts, man. I'm sorry. So there are multiple ways to see something in regard to its symbolism. But nonetheless, remember, it can't, an object or a person or whatever it is that you're looking at that's coming out, it could be the name of a character. So we need to be able to read something more into the literal sense. And that's where the symbolism comes out. So please just take note of that. When you walk into a narrative, right? So when you walk into a narrative, the first thing that you want to kind of look at is, what is the perspective? What is the point of view? Is it in the first person I, right? So that is the individual walking through the story, first person I, sharing with you what they see and their thoughts, right? So it's a very limited perspective. So with a first-person narrator, you have to take into account whether or not you perceive them to be reliable or unreliable. Do they seem sober in mind, or do they seem corrupt and distracted by something else, or is there an illness or something that's at play, that makes that narrator in the first person unreliable? Many individuals consider, Holden Caulfield from The Catcher in the Rye to be unreliable because of his state of mind. He's gone through, tremendous trauma. He's sick, he's smoking, he's drinking, he's malnourished, and so on. So what we're getting from his brain is something then that is, unreliable because of all these forces that are acting upon him. He has post-traumatic stress from his brother's death and so on. So again, assessing whether or not a narrator is reliable or unreliable will unfold during the story. But that's the first thing you do. You assess point of view. Is it first person or is it third person? In third person, we have, two examples to work with. One is it third person limited or unlimited omniscient, okay? So a limited omniscient is when the narrator is referring to a character, by their name, or he or she or they, depending on, again, how the story is being written. So the narrator looks down upon this one character, and it follows them along and gives their perspective, and their perspective only, and can see into their mind and hand the audience their thoughts. That is a third person limited. Third person unlimited omniscient is when the narrator can break away and give us the perspective of any character at any time, as well as share that character's thoughts. That narrator then is considered more godlike or unlimited in their scope of understanding the scene. They can go in and out of everyone's brain. They can give any character's perspective at any given time. So please, when you walk into a story, you got to assess. Okay, what's the point of view? Right? We're handed the point of view. Then you kind of look at how the author then begins the process of kind of developing the setting, what kind of imagery do they use, what kind of picture are they painting of the setting, and then from there, you want to take into account, how quickly they begin the process of handing you the protagonist. From the protagonist, we see how that kind of protagonist is characterized, right? How are they described to us? What kind of person are they? So again, this is when you walk into a story, these are the things that you should kind of, take into account, what you're looking for. From there, what is the emerging conflict for this protagonist? What is the struggle they're going to fight against? How much of it is internal and external, okay? And with the emerging conflict, then, who is the emerging antagonist? And that could be, again, a person or a group or an institution or a force of nature, You think about how many movies that we've had out there that have been, person against nature. It's tornadoes, it's earthquakes, it's tsunamis, whatever. So don't forget that an antagonist can be, again, a force of nature. So we have this then conflict, right? The emerging conflict, the emerging antagonist. Then we examine how the protagonist and the antagonist struggle, okay? And how those struggles play out and kind of, again, usually within the struggles and the conflict, we'll see some form of ideology that is emerging, the customs and beliefs factor, okay? And then eventually we get to how is this narrative, how is this story resolved? That's just to give you kind of an idea of again, and then as you're walking through, you're also using the other terms and so on to assist you in, again, get a greater understanding of the story. Briefly, one of the terms that we're going to work with is ideology. And its simplest, it's our customs and beliefs, right? The customs and beliefs of an individual, group, society of people, okay? Customs and beliefs. Customs being actions, the things that we do, beliefs being the ideas that usually lead to those actions, right? But, the one definition, you can skip the page, the PowerPoint on, page on, further consideration. Don't worry about that element of ideology. The more important thing is understanding that ideology in the times that we live now is so heavily manufactured. It's images and perceptions that are manufactured by usually kind of sources with tremendous influence, right? So, we think, coming off of this political season that we've had so many media sources out there, trying to create images and perceptions, ideas and perceptions, and then feed those customs and beliefs to audiences, and hopefully the audience, buys into those customs and beliefs. Now you have then soldiers on your side. We need to understand how these systems operate, and what they ultimately do so often is manipulate us into doing what they want us to do, rather than our keeping our sense of free will and autonomy in play. So that's kind of more of the definition I want you to focus on, when you go through the PowerPoint, is the one that deals with kind of, again, these manufactured kind of images and perceptions, and how, again, these are fed to us. Because ultimately, ideology, where do we get our customs and beliefs? We go to our parents, grandparents, siblings, peers, education system, religious indoctrination. It goes on and on and on. And this goes back to, why do you think the way you think? This begins the process, customs and beliefs, forming your thinking mind, how you perceive the world, and then how you perceive others in it. Because then what we're talking about is elements of identity, right? What makes us who we are? And so those are those things like our race, our kind of ethnicity, nationality, our gender, our sexuality, our education, where we were born, our region, our place in family, our psychological state, our food choices. All these things people use to identify themselves are things that we tend to, as a culture, struggle and fight over, because for some reason they get put into a sense of binary understanding. And binary reasoning is a mathematical term. So it's zeros and ones, it's pluses and minuses. And when we say one part of our culture is a plus and one part of our culture is a minus, then what we're doing is we're putting one group into a dominant section and one into a kind of a negative position, an oppressive position. Simply saying that, like, for example, I used to, and again, bear with me on the examples, okay? In our culture, right? When we look at, again, where the plus and minuses fall for decades, okay? If you said to someone, is it easier in our culture to be a man or a woman? And of course, the answer would be, it's been easier to be a man. You have more autonomy, right? So men get a plus, women get a minus. And we begin the process of believing that sense of a binary, when it's complete bullshit, right? But here we go. The mindset then comes toward us. Is it better to be culturally straight or gay? And that used to be kind of the real binary. We didn't even kind of chop it up and have an understanding of kind of more underlining and valuable identities that went beneath simply the idea of being gay. But so many people fearful for so long. That, okay, so the plus goes to only, we're going to give that straight group, and then the gay group be getting in the negative. So binary reasoning creates such hostility, when in reality we all just exist together, in a society and culture. And again, why can't we have a sense of understanding and support and kindness for each other? Why is it we get chopped up into these binaries? Because when we start the process of believing a binary, and we act on it in kind of unkind ways, then what we're doing is, we begin the process of demonizing others, making them seem less human for who they are, simply based on perhaps characteristic or belief. We can, oppress them physically or legally through laws. We can beat them up, we can kill them, we can lock them up, we can hold them down, we can attack them, and so we almost try to justify this level of oppression. And certainly the other thing we do is we marginalize them. So we take their interests, their needs, and we don't put them in the center, but like a notebook, we push them off to the margin, to the side. Their issues go to the side. They don't stay in the center. And so we keep certain groups in the center of power, right? This egocentrism. And what we really need in the center is polycentrism. Many in the center. That way, the more voices that we have in a discussion, then hopefully the greater, we can be in terms of, providing a better society for everybody. And that way, all our stories have a sense of kind of growth and prosperity. So, you have to take into account as well, what makes your identity. I told you to think of like 3 elements of your identity that make you you, and kind of, and I said for better or worse, for better or worse, okay? So Mod 2, this is a quick, kind of summary and some points that I think you should follow when you go into the stories. So you have 20 questions on the terms and ideology, a simple exam, 5 points each, give you an hour. Usually something like this in class would take maybe 25 minutes. I'm going to double the time, give you an hour. When you answer a question, you can't go back. Please keep that in mind. You answer a question, you can't go back, because sometimes I use, there'd be too many hints and pointers, dropped around. So question is answered, you can't go back, so please realize that. Use the time that you have. Take notes, you can have your notes by your side, your term notes, your identity notes, you can have them by your side. And, again, my thing is to make everyone as successful as possible, or assist you in being as successful as possible. If you don't want to do the work, that's on you. You have a right to fail. And so hopefully these terms, as well as, kind of the understanding of ideology and so on, and identity will help you then look at and examine the stories to get a greater sense of understanding. Real quick, when we get into identity and the different categories, please keep in mind that identity is a huge umbrella, right? A subject. Then subsubjects would be gender, age, religion, and so on. Then we have subjects from that, right? And so we have to keep on. We can't just say gender is a very important issue in the story. We have to be specific to what element of gender or sexuality is important. We need to keep going down. It's easy enough to change a kind of something from being about a subject. If I said gender is important, I'm saying too big a subject. But if I said, quickly, you could say like, gender is limiting and oppressive. Okay, well, at least now you have something that's more thematic, right? And then you would say, okay, how is gender limiting and more, how is gender limiting in this particular narrative? And then you'll get into the characters, and then, might break down to elements of masculinity, femininity, and so on. Keep asking questions down from the top umbrella. Be specific as you go through. In what way does, and again, that aspect of, looking at characters, I'm a little out of sequence, looking at characters in regard to, it's like one of the last couple of slides in the PowerPoint, whether they are demonized, oppressed, marginalized, or empowered. That was the last one. I want to mention that again. Does the character have freedom and autonomy to move about, and by the time we get to the resolution, right, the resolving of the conflict, does the character, are they still oppressed, demonized, marginalized, or have they risen to a point of empowerment? And following those trends throughout a story, I think, is important, because we can see them in our own lives. Are you oppressed? Are you demonized? Have you been marginalized, or do you feel empowered? Think about how that plays out in your life. How do you feel about your free will? How do you use it? Where are you with your autonomy? How are you in regard to understanding your own narrative and your place in it as the hero of your story? You need to do these things for yourself, as well as, how you examine them for these characters. Greater understanding of self is what we're looking for here. Okay? That's the ultimate goal, to understand why stories matter is for us, how they're going to help us be better human beings and live a more thriving life. I've hit about 24 minutes on this one. I didn't want to go that long, but I did. Anyway, take notes on this. This is Mod 2, and this is kind of, just a brief reflection on the terms and the PowerPoint. And again, you're going to have multiple choice exam on the terms and ideology, and please review those, and that'll be out next week. All right, enjoy your very cold weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.